You want to try something crazy? When you get home tonight, tomorrow, whenever you're going to get home, brush your teeth. That's not crazy. I hope not. But you just never know. So brush your teeth. And when you brush your teeth, for how long it takes you to do it, think about nothing. Just think about the bristles hitting your gums, the bristles on your teeth, going across. Think about nothing. And see how hard it is. Get in the shower and think about nothing. I know most of you do your great daily planning in the shower. Okay, I got to do this, and this is what I'm going to do, and you start putting shampoo in your hair and doing whatever you're doing. But just feel the water in your body. Be in the present moment. When we have, and we do have, these emotional needs that are up on the screen, it's security, it's control, and it's feeling adequacy. And when we have those three things get out of kilter, inside of us, our body has a really cool mechanism. When our security is being tested, all of a sudden we have anxiety. When the control factors that we have, the need to have some sense of control, is getting off the reservation, we have frustration. And the same thing happens for adequacy, we become sad. The problem is, part of the problem is, many of us have been trained not to feel anxiety. It's a bad thing. Don't feel sadness, it's a bad thing. Don't be anxious, we'll study more next time. We've been ingrained not to feel this way. And those feelings are trigger points saying, hey, something's wrong. And then the problem is we connect those feelings to thoughts and then we get off the reservation. Which means, which I'm going to walk you through, when we start thinking about stuff, especially if we think, whoop, too fast. If we're thinking about things in the future, you are physically right here. I'm now thinking about the future. I'm thinking about what I need to do, how I need to react. And I start saying words just like they are up there, would, should, and I start saying things like what if, or if then. If I don't actually get this deal done, I'm in trouble. You might start saying things like to yourself, with fear and anxiety comes with it, you start projecting yourself out in the future. Now the same thing happens if we look behind us. And we look over here, we start reliving things that's already occurred. We're in the present moment physically, but we're sitting there at our desk here, thinking about something that's already occurred. We can't change it. And we start doing the shoulda, coulda, woulda. And as our mind starts doing the shoulda, coulda, woulda, we start beating ourselves up. Or worse is, or in addition to, instead of doing the equilibrium of time from left to right, or the future and the past, let's look outside when we're outside of our space. If you want to take a look at that, it's a little esoteric. But when we're outside of our space, that is when we start having frustration with people and or companies. And those three things erode your self-esteem. Some of the classic old term stuff from Sandler said one of the greatest things that, not one of the greatest, one of the things that erodes self-esteem more than anything else is anxiety and the feeling of inadequacy. It's two things. And those are what gets us off where we are emotionally in the present moment. So when we look at this big thing that we have, which is where we are physically right here. And we can be in the past and we can be in the future. Yet, when we're in the past, if we start reliving things in the past, we feel sad, which is the natural feelings. When we start looking at the future, all of a sudden we have anxiety. That anxiety and sadness creates outcomes. And when we look at sadness, there's only two choices. One is we have guilt, or we can gain a lesson from it. And guilt is when we actually connect our feelings to thoughts. And feelings to thoughts are things like, I could have done this, I should have done this, why didn't I do that? Oh my gosh, if I don't, then all of a sudden you start thinking about the future, and you can connect them all, right? You start having anxiety. The only thing you can have with the future is motivation or fear. You connect these things. All of a sudden, with fear and sadness and guilt, we're going back and forth. And by the way, another word for fear is worry. So you start saying things in your head while you're in the middle of a sales call. This is not going well. I should have asked better questions. I can't believe this is doing this. If this happens, I'm not going to come back with a sale. If I don't go back with a sale, I'm in trouble. My boss is going to be angry. Who are you not paying attention to? The person in front of you. You've already shot yourself, buried yourself, and you're not even out of the meeting yet. On your piece of paper, real quick. I don't care where you're taking notes, if you're taking notes or not. What I'd like you to do is draw the T-bar real fast. Left is past, right is future. Ask yourself real quick, shoulda, coulda, woulda. If you haven't written it down, write it down. You can actually hear people going into guilt. They're connecting the feelings of sadness to other people, other situations, outside stuff. That's when we get off the reservation. So what I want you to do on your notes is this. Just give me one or two things that you've been thinking about, either today or yesterday, you feel guilty about. Just write them down. Things that you feel sad about that you've been reliving over your head again and again and again. I should have done this. I could have done that. Why didn't I do this? This is what's going to happen. I'm no good. Then all of a sudden, that guilt gets connected to future. So what I'd like you to do now is write down two things that you worry about. Is it finances? Is it your job? Is it opening new business? Is it your kids? Just write down two things, both of them. Boom, boom. Now, what I'd also like you to write down is, in the last day, because I know it's happened today to most of you, is that your fears about people, and we're going to get to that one in a second, but I want to take you a look at the past for a sec. When you look at the past, the things you wrote down for guilt, you only have two options. You live with it, and you feel guilty about it, and it erodes you. Or you go down another path. The other path is, what's your lesson? What can I learn from what happened? Instead of saying I should, I could, I woulda, what would you have done differently if you could have? Granted the piece of paper. I would have done this. Bam! If you would have done that, that's your lesson. And then what do you have to do with the experience that you keep reliving over in your head from the past? What do you have to do with it? Let it go. So on your notes, you got to make sure that we have this down. The difference between guilt and experience is the fact that you cannot gain experience from guilt because you cannot let it go. Letting it go means it's out of your head. When you relive it and relive it and relive it and relive it, that's called guilt. And it just eats you apart. And you're never going to learn from anything, from guilt.